Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and we're going to be doing some retrospective content here on the channel, and I thought of no better place to start than the 2019 season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jameis Winston's last year with the Buccaneers, because this was a big turning point in the team's history. After this year, the team would get Tom Brady. They would go on to win the Super Bowl 1 year after this season had occurred. So how the heck did the Buccaneers get to that point where they were winning a Super Bowl after this season, after going 7-9? Well, I do want to dive into it in this video today. So I feel like such a great place to start is with the hiring of Bruce Arians. Right? Or I guess I should say not Todd Bowles. Dirk Cutter was fired as the team's head coach in 2018 after a 5-11 season. Just to give you a brief, synopsis of Dirk Cutter, it was his first time ever being a head coach in the NFL. It was his last time being a head coach in the NFL. Finished with a 5-11 record in 2018. His second year in a row with that record was pretty much curtains in that type of situation. So the team brought in Bruce Arians. He had actually taken 2018 off because he was technically retired at the time. He had done some broadcasting throughout the 2018 season after he had had a very successful 5-year stint here with the Arizona Cardinals, where he did end up winning 49 games out of 80 for a 61.9 win percentage. Not bad at all, in my opinion, by the way. He made it to the NFC divisional round, I believe, or maybe even the championship game. Let me go ahead and see if we can take a look at this. I believe it was the championship game there against the Green Bay Packers. So if we can go ahead and take a look here. No, sorry, it was the Carolina Panthers, and against MVP Cam Newton, where they got absolutely demolished by MVP Cam Newton that year. But point being is that after that, you had the 2016, 2017 years where things didn't go great for Arizona, all things considered. They did deal with a good bit of injuries, I think, all things considered, and just some down play from the team. But one guy who did a really good job throughout this stretch was Carson Palmer, who had literally revived his career in Arizona. He was with Bruce Arians basically throughout that entire tenure, right? And during that stretch, you take a look, he had 105 touchdowns, 57 interceptions, and 16,700 passing yards in 60 games with the Cardinals. Pretty darn good, all things considered. Now, it did lead to a 13-3 record in 2015. Palmer made the Pro Bowl, 10-6 record after he basically, a lot of people probably thought his career was done in Oakland, where, quite frankly, he had 35 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, and only 6,700 passing yards. Palmer ended his career on a really high note here in Arizona. And that was kind of what Arians was known for, right? Was being this quarterback guru, essentially, throughout his collegiate coaching career. He was a 2-time AP Coach of the Year. I believe he won it in I can't remember what year. Did he win one with the Bucs? He may have won it once with the Bucs, but he was a 2012 Assistant Coach of the Year. He won a lot of awards before coming to the Bucs, was the point. And even taking a look at his offenses in the past, I mean, in Arizona, he had the number 1 passing offense in 2015, the number 9 passing offense in 2016. Let's take a look at just the points as well. You take a look, not including his years in Tampa, second highest scoring offense in 2015, sixth highest scoring offense in 2016. He was with the Pittsburgh Steelers as an OC with Ben Roethlisberger for a long time there as well. And overall, his offenses were just pretty good. Things didn't necessarily work out in Cleveland in 01 and in 03. There's a couple of down years there in Arizona, but pretty much for the most part, Arians was putting up top 18 plus offenses throughout a majority of his coaching career, not just as a head coach, but even as an offensive coordinator, but especially as a head coach. There was where you saw Arians really grow and develop quarterbacks, right? He's worked with guys like Andrew Luck. He worked with guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Carson Palmer, and a bunch of other guys. So Arians was brought in as this guy who could hopefully fix Jameis Winston, right? That was the big hope, is can Bruce Arians fix Jameis Winston? Now, it's important to make a note of where Winston was at this point before we dive into the entirety of that 2019 season. He had 4 years in the league, had posted 88 touchdowns, 58 interceptions, 14,628 receiving yards, and really was at a crossroads in his career at that point. He was playing on the 5th-year option. There was legitimate reason to both keep Jameis Winston and to get rid of Jameis Winston, right? He had a 21-33 record at the time, 61.6 completion percentage. Like, you look at these stats and it's not terrible, in my opinion. He did have a bit of a fumbling problem as well. If we can take a look at his rushing stats here as well, you will notice that there was a significant amount of fumbles, 38 to be exact. So Jameis had a bit of a turnover problem. And with Arians coming in, you were hoping that that could be something that could be fixed, something that would be able to be corrected and adjusted with Arians coming in at the helm. Now, you know, there was a few things that did change. Ronald Jones was going to be getting significantly more snaps moving forward at the running back position. You had a lot of different guys coming in with certain types of roles. Brashad Perriman was, you know, brought in and going to be doing some interesting things and things along those lines. But the main focus was on Jameis Winston. And look, taking a look at this season, let's just go up to the bye week. Things were not going well. The Bucs were 2-4 at this point. You take a look at the defense specifically, Todd Bowles' defense. I mean, goodness, they're allowing 31, they're allowing 32, they're allowing 40, they're allowing 31, they're allowing 37. It was not great under any circumstances. And I do want to take a look at Jameis Winston's logs during that time, because I feel like it's very important as well to really see where he was at that point, right? Through 5 games, right? Or I guess I should say 6 games here. They also allowed 14 points at that point. We're going to add that 6th game to the list here. Winston was not playing great. He had a 60% completion percentage, 10 interceptions to 12 touchdowns, 1,771 passing yards. Was not great. 5 fumbles in there as well. He lost 1. Like, Winston had a lot of turnovers. He was averaging about 2 interceptions per game during that time. Now, granted, he was sacked a lot during this time as well, which is very important to note. Sacked 25 times, averaging 4 sacks per game. So there was a lot wrong with this offense at the time, right? There was a lot. I do want to go into some of the game logs just to see what the heck happened throughout, you know, these things. So you had the Bucs get a pick 6, which was great in week number 1. But then Jameis throws 2 pick 6s in this game. One to Richard Sherman, who would eventually become a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, and one to Ahkello Witherspoon as well. This was another very big issue for Jameis Winston, was pick 6s. He threw, you know, again, a couple of interceptions in this game. 2 of them resulted in points for the other team. 3 interceptions to be 100% there. So you take away those 14 points, it's no longer 31-17, right? You're looking at a tie ball game at that point. And even then, the Bucs had a chance to win. It was 23-17. You go out there, you get a touchdown, you get an extra point, but then that pick 6 happened. So really it looked like those problems were rearing their ugly head yet again. You go to week number 2 versus the Carolina Panthers. Yes, the Bucs were able to get a win. And that's fantastic. No interceptions from Jameis. So that's good, right? You want to see that. You wanted to see that type of Jameis Winston play throughout the entirety of the year, but unfortunately, you just had too much of, you know, inconsistencies. The New York Giants loss was a tough loss, right? The Buccaneers had gotten in field goal winning position to win the game, and you just had a situation where Matt Gay, the Buccaneers kicker at the time, missed I believe it was like a 30-something yarder, something along those lines, and it was just a loss, right? Like, the Bucs could not get out of their own way in these matchups, be it interceptions, be it the kicker missing a field goal. It just wasn't working at this point. You know, it was definitely a, you know, Bucs team of past, so to speak. Also, Matt Gay missed 2 extra points during this game as well. So just a really bad game for the Bucs kicker. Really, the Bucs should have been able to win that game. They did end up beating the LA Rams, which was not even probably, it was Jameis Winston's best game of the year. I mean, 385 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns to 1 interception. I mean, Jameis lit it up in this game. And that's kind of where you get peak Jameis, right? I don't believe No, there was a pick six in this game. Jameis Winston threw a pick six in 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So again, you had a lot of issues coming up. You go to the next week here for the Bucs, and it is a loss to New Orleans, and this was another game where you just saw some good play from Jameis, but more inconsistencies everywhere else. The Bucs just couldn't get out of their own way, all things considered. And then you keep on going now to the sixth game before the bye week against the Carolina Panthers. Again, another really just tough game, all things considered, where the Buccaneers defense got pretty overpowered, all things considered. Winston having 5 interceptions does not help anything. Also losing 1 fumble as well. 6 turnovers from Jameis Winston in this game. Just wasn't good. Just was not good. So you can see that obviously Winston was struggling throughout this point with a lot of turnovers that was resulting in the team being able to the opposing team being able to score more points. So is that like the sole reason why you saw this many points be given up throughout the first half of the season? No, not necessarily, but it certainly did not help at all. But then you had the bye week. The Bucs lose to the Tennessee Titans by a score of 23-27. Again, things just continued to really down spiral, all things considered here, for the Bucs in terms of how their season is going. You take a look, fourth quarter, Titans go up 27-23. Bucs had 6 minutes 55 seconds left to find an answer. They didn't. Winston throws another 2 picks, loses 2 fumbles in this game, a 4-turnover game. But Arians stood by his guy. Even after this point, Arians was not backing down on Winston being his guy, and kudos to him. I mean, really, the Bucs didn't have many other options at that point, but, Winston was not playing good. I mean, 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, over 2,000 passing yards. He also lost 3 fumbles throughout this process as well. Things didn't get much better whenever, you had that Seattle Seahawks game where the Bucs lost in overtime, and again, another heartbreaking loss, very similar to a New York Giants style of game. And the Bucs found themselves at 2-6 at week 9. At this point, there was a lot of doubt with Jameis Winston, whether or not in fact, I think a lot of people probably assumed at this point, like, okay, Jameis Winston is not going to be this team's quarterback going forward. I mean, especially, like, yes, he did have a fine game versus Seattle, but 16 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 4 lost fumbles. I mean, he has as many turnovers as touchdowns. It's not great. It's not great. So unless something drastically changed, this would be a really bad first year for Bruce Arians and just the entirety of this Buccaneers staff. Things got a bit better. You get a win versus Arizona. That's good. Winston still didn't look great in that game. Still threw 2 interceptions, but they did find a way to win. You then go into New Orleans, get another ugly loss where Jameis Winston throws 4 interceptions at that game. At this point, he's at 19 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, 4 lost fumbles. And again, you just found yourself in a way of just like, wow, this is not going well at all for Jameis Winston and this Bruce Arians thing. This doesn't seem like it's working out. Yes, he's throwing a lot of passes, but goodness, he is getting sacked a lot. He's throwing a lot of interceptions. He was, averaging sacked 4 times per game. It just seemed like, yes, this team had potency, but they didn't have the efficiency to get the job done. And then they went on a 4-game win streak where Winston, during that 4-game win streak, this is like peak Jameis, where he has 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He gets a rushing touchdown in there as well. Only loses 1 fumble. He's throwing for 1,495 passing yards, and the team is winning, right? You beat the Atlanta Falcons. You beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. You beat the Indianapolis Colts. You beat the Detroit Lions, all by, all scoring 30 or more points in every game but one where you scored 28 against Jacksonville. This is what you wanted to see from that last season. And after you take all of those games and you couple it together with what had happened before, Winston had 30 touchdowns. He had 24 interceptions and 5 lost fumbles. So he has 1 more touchdown than turnover at that point. But after that 4-game win streak, The Bucs found themselves at a 7-7 record. They had really bounced back from the fray, so to speak, and you saw a lot of conversation of, okay, maybe Jameis Winston can be this guy moving forward. He just had an incredible month here where he was throwing a lot of touchdowns, really limiting his interceptions. I mean, you take away those 3 interceptions from the Colts game, you're looking at a very good stretch there from Winston after some, maybe you could call it early season hiccups here up to this point, but the second half of the season was going well. Hey, maybe they can finish with a winning record. Maybe they can try and make a spot in the wild card. Let's see what happens. And then you have the Houston Texans game. That did not go well. This, in a lot of people's opinion, was the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for the Jameis Winston era for the Bucs. 23-20, right, is the final score of this game. You had situation where Bradley Roby, literally first drive of the game, gets a pick six on Jameis Winston. That doesn't happen. You win the football game, even if you just take that play away alone, right? But Winston came out and was bad. 4 interceptions on the game. It was bad. It was really bad. And it was super demoralizing to see after you had this incredible month of play where you think, okay, maybe this can be the guy. Maybe this is the chance here where Jameis Winston can be the quarterback for the Bucs going forward. You saw an incredible 4 weeks out of Jameis, reverts right back to it. And things didn't get better in that Atlanta Falcons game. Take a look at it. The Falcons were another team that was kind of really down and out. That loss to the Texans put the Bucs out of any type of playoff contention. You take a look here, 22 points in the second quarter. The Bucs did not score a single point after that. They blew a, 22, well, not a 22-point lead, I guess I should say, but they blow a 6-point lead in the second quarter, don't score absolutely anything, and it just didn't go well. It didn't go well. I mean, the final pass of Jameis Winston's career was Deion Jones' pick six in overtime to win the game, essentially, for the Atlanta Falcons. Winston had 2 picks in this game, pretty low completion percentage, and this was essentially the last pick of his career with Deion Jones was the interception that gave Jameis Winston 30 interceptions on that year. And really just spelled the inconsistency, right, of Winston as a whole throughout this year. Again, 33 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, 47 sacks on the year as well. You take a look at fumbles lost. He had a good bit of those as well. I think he had, let me see if I can find it. He had 12 total fumbles on the year. It doesn't necessarily say how many fumbles lost, but it was the inconsistency that really doomed this Bucs team. Now, you can argue that, yes, you take a look, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans missed a lot of games. Or not even a lot, but they missed the second half of the season. They still made the Pro Bowl, so shout out to both of them. But Rashad Perriman had to come in. Scotty Miller had to start a couple of games to end out the year. Justin Watson had to start a couple of games to end out the year. But what's so important to note is whenever you did look at that initial stretch there of 2019, 1, you look before that bye week. 2, you look before that 4-game stretch. Like, Winston was already showing the signs of where he would end that year, right? I mean, before that 4-game win streak, 10 weeks into the year, he was already as many turnovers as touchdowns, even more if you would count the fumbles lost as well. So, I mean, the signs were there that was just going to be the year that Jameis Winston was going to have. And in a year where you finished 7-9 and you needed more consistency at that quarterback position, it really spelled the end there with the final 2 games of the year where Winston threw 6 interceptions in 2 games, where you had to look at some other options. You had to. You owed it to your team because, quite frankly, that 2019 Bucs team was not a bad football team. I say that because you take a look, you had 2 1,000-yard wide receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Yes, Jameis Winston was throwing the football there. He had over 5,000 passing yards, but that doesn't mean much whenever you're turning the ball over just as much as you're scoring touchdowns. You had a fine rushing year in terms of Jones and Barber getting some playing time. Rushing for 1,500 yards on the year, I don't think is necessarily terrible, all things considered. Let me see if we can actually take a look here. Yeah, I mean, the Bucs had, in terms of yards, the 21st or 24th rushing offense, but still had a number one rushing defense. Didn't have the best, had one of the worst passing defenses in the league, but, was still able to show a lot of good ability. But there were certainly some things that you could clean up on. Matt Gay missing that game winner against the Giants. That could have changed the trajectory of the season. The pass rush was really good. Obviously, Shaq Barrett getting 19.5 sacks on the year, broke the Bucs sack record. JPP had 8.5 sacks on the year. Carl Nassib had 6 sacks on the year. This was a team that you felt like was on the cusp, was a team that could possibly do some things if you just make a few corrections. And you take a look at that 2020 season, Bucs did make some corrections. They moved on from Matt Gay. They moved on from some of those offensive linemen that they had throughout that 2019 season, and ultimately they moved on from Jameis Winston. And whether or not you do feel it was or wasn't the right move, I don't blame the Bucs for looking at what other options were there, because it was the inconsistencies, right? It was the inconsistencies that ultimately doomed Jameis. And it wasn't just one stretch. It was throughout the entirety of the year. He almost came back and saved it with that 4-game stretch there, but it ultimately just ended up being, a reversion back to the interceptions, to the turnovers. That was ultimately what doomed Winston's time there. I think that if you win that Houston game, or if you win, I mean, literally you could have won both these games, and Jameis Winston may still be your starting quarterback today for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it didn't end up happening. The inconsistencies were too much for the Bucs to handle, and it was a blown opportunity where if you win 9 games, maybe you are a team that can go into the wild card round. Maybe you are a team that, at least at the very minimum, showcases that they can be a playoff team down the line with this quarterback, right? It just didn't happen. Unfortunately, it did not happen. And that was it for the Jameis Winston era. But I felt like it was important to showcase this because it was an important moment in history. If Jameis Winston didn't have those inconsistencies, if the Bucs didn't look for other options, you would have never had a Super Bowl season the next year with Tom Brady at the helm. So it's always important to get a retrospective look at these moments, at this history, and dive into it a little bit deeper. So let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions on that 2019 season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jameis Winston at the helm. What do you think was the ultimate downfall for Winston that year? Was it the turnovers? Was it the offensive line? Was it the receiving room getting hurt towards the second half of that year? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed. We'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.